First of all, Dave, appreciate the time, man. I did not realize this is your 28th year in the NFL. What were you, 7 when you started this?
No, I was 9. Yeah.
I mean, you still have a full head of hair. It's not gray. Your beard's not gray. My beard's gray, and I got no hair.
Hey, genetics.
Second year with the Cardinals. You were in Detroit for 16.
Correct.
The last 4 as the director of scouting. Were you in Detroit during that time? Where were you living, and how did that work?
No, I actually never lived in Detroit. Lived in Houston for a couple years, Jersey for a year, and Charlotte the main part of the time, actually Mooresville, North Carolina. But I'd be up there quite a bit for meetings, camp. I think we have 4 sets of draft meetings, so I'd go for those, mini camp, training camp, stuff like that. So I was up there quite a bit, just never made my home base there.
So now that you're here and you're living in Phoenix as the assistant general manager, how's your role different here on a day-to-day basis than it was in Detroit?
Well, I'm in the office every day as opposed to being on the road. The majority of my career was always a road guy, always a college road guy. So I had to get used to the kind of daily grind. It's a different schedule. It's a grind as a college scout, certainly, but you're in the team meetings now. You're doing more daily roster management stuff. That's the main part of it, and more pro scouting than I was doing. I was pretty much focused solely on college, my time in Detroit.
So when you're on the road in Detroit as a college scout, are you on the road every week? How many days a week? Because there are a lot of people listening. They hear about the life of a scout, but they don't really know all the details.
Yeah, you're on the road for basically you go up to training camp for a week, and then you're hitting the colleges till basically Thanksgiving. So it's about whatever that is, 4 months or so that you're pretty much gone. Different organizations have different time schedules. Some you have to be out for 10 days before you come home. Some you can go home on the weekends, depending if you can catch a game in your area, stuff like that. But you're pretty much gone Sunday through Friday at the minimum, on the road seeing games in your area or kind of covering the whole country nationally, whatever your respective role is. But you're not home very often in the fall.
And when you're at a school, how much time are you watching film? How much time do you get to meet with the coaches or the strength and conditioning coordinator, the trainer? How do you stay for the game? Because I've seen some scouts, they come, they watch warm-ups, and they leave. They don't stay for the game because they can watch the tape.
Yeah, usually there's kind of a set schedule for the day that they'll give you access to the training staff, the strength staff, sometimes academics, different position coaches. A pro liaison is going to lead you through the day, and then you have a large block of time to watch film. Then you got practice, and then a lot of guys will stay for different games. It usually depends on how you set your schedule up. You finish at a school on a Thursday, and then you may stay in town, write reports on Friday, see the game Saturday, and move on to your next spot. Or you may start your week off at the game, stay there, and go to the school on Monday for the film and stuff like that in the background. But yeah, you're touching on all those things. You're trying to get as much information as you can out of school, as well as getting a video and physical look at the player while you're there.
And now, since you said you're doing more pro scouting, what does that look like?
Well, that's kind of look at the teams we're facing, watch some of their guys, watch upcoming free agents based off positions, stuff like that. Kind of get a head start on free agency throughout the season as we go, and then also mixing in quite a bit of college scouting as well. So trying to balance the two of them, whereas before I wasn't balancing anything. It was just all college, so that's been fun.
So like a week in preseason, will you go back today, this week, and watch the preseason games that everybody else played so that you have an idea, hey, this guy, I like this guy. If he gets cut, we're going to have our eye on him.
Correct. We're all just up there watching a ton of preseason tape now. We'll watch every single game. Certain positions guys are focusing on, certain teams guys are focusing on. I'm just kind of watching games to do exactly what you're talking about. See who's popping, see who flashes, start digging into those specific players a little more. Areas where we might think we're weak or heavy, kind of focusing on stuff like that. But, yeah, you're just trying to get a feel of what's going on in the league right now so we can be ready.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to get you on was to let people know who you are, because obviously you're playing a key role with the organization and will continue to unless a GM opportunity comes along with another team. How did you get started in this? Was it something when I think you played college football when you were done? Is this something you wanted to do? Did you think about coaching? Did you have other aspirations, or was it always scouting?
Yeah, I always wanted to be involved in professional sports, specifically football. I played small school football at Springfield College. I was a reserve linebacker, defensive end, and I knew obviously I didn't have any future doing that, but I never really wanted to get in the coaching side. To me, it was always kind of I was fascinated by the draft, roster construction, kind of how to assemble a championship team. And all that was really interesting to me. Never really got the coaching bug. I was fortunate that Charlie Casserly was a Springfield College grad, so he was just happened to be looking for a scouting intern at the time. I was looking for an internship, so the stars kind of aligned right there, and owe a lot to him for giving me my shot. And I'm not sure what I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this, but I think I was probably meant to do this because it all worked out.
And you met Monti Ossenfort very early in your career, right? When did you guys meet? How did you meet? And how did you maintain the connection? Because 2 decades later, it's kind of interesting. It's, I guess, a good life lesson, right? You build relationships early on. You never know how, even decades later, things might come together like they did here for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the basic treat people the way you want to be treated kind of thing, and you make good relationships early, and they last for a long time. There's a lot of guys still in this business that I've known now. Like you said, I'm getting old before, but I've known guys 20 years and stuff like that. And it's funny when I talk to some of the younger guys upstairs, and they don't know anybody, and they've only been at 5-7 years, stuff like that. I've been doing this almost 30 years, like you said. So I got a lot of relationships. I met Monti in 2002. He was starting an internship with the Houston Texans, and at that time I was an area scout. But he was doing a lot of the roles I had done a couple years earlier for Washington under Charlie, so I was a resource for him. Great dude. We kind of just hit it off. Very similar personalities, backgrounds, stuff like that, so it was easy. And then he bounced to the Patriots for a year and then came back to us for 2 years. And again, I'm not going to say I was his mentor or anything like that, but he would hit me on questions because I'd been doing the same thing 3 years before, and I also knew, hey, here's some of the pitfalls that are going to happen when you're starting to get your feet wet in this business, and let me help you kind of get ahead of some of those things. So we hit it off, and then we also lived in the same apartment complex, around the same age, so a lot of fun. A bunch of young guys over there, some guys that are still in the league right now, like Eugene Armstrong, Jamal Stevenson, guys with the Broncos, Vikings. Rob Kissel's upstairs. So we had a really good, cohesive, young group of guys getting their start in the business that are still friends to this day, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, when Monti was on the pod in May after the draft, he mentioned you and Rob and just how instrumental both you guys were in his career. He also mentioned you talked about, 20 years ago, living in the same complex. You guys actually lived together, right? When he was staying at your apartment, right? When he
first came out here, yeah. The guy was too cheap to get his own place, so he had to stay on my couch for a while. But yeah, no, that was good. He was getting his mansion built. So yeah.
Well, there are very few people that I trust more when it comes to, first of all, just evaluation of human beings, but also football knowledge than Chris Spielman. And I've known Chris, and we've been close friends for a long time, worked together at ESPN, but we're even friends before that. Now, Chris was a mess in terms of, like, he'd come in dragging his sport coat on the ground. Sometimes he maybe would have, like, a piece of Kleenex stuck to his upper lip, or you could hear in his pockets him getting into some sort of candy, and there'd be food and stuff everywhere. We actually at one point had a nickname for him, the Addict. It was a joke, but it was more like every 30 seconds something's going in, either caffeine or dip, and this was 15,
mostly dip, but yeah.
But this was 15 years ago. But all kidding aside, Chris, in terms of like human beings, one of the all-time greats. And Chris called me a year and a half ago and said, "Hey, there's a guy that we absolutely hated to lose. You're going to love him. His name's Dave Sears. You guys just struck gold." So what was your relationship like with Chris? And again, Chris does not throw around compliments. Like, he doesn't just throw things out there. So for him to say that, he obviously sees something in you. How did you guys connect, and why do you think he likes you so much?
I think Chris and I hit it off, really quickly. I remember the first time I met him, I went into his office, and it was kind of strange because he's got a big mirror there, and he had a shirt off, and he was doing curls. He was all oiled up, and this is kind of weird. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway,
that wouldn't surprise me. Actually, I thought you were being serious.
No, Chris is great. Like, he's obviously an elite NFL player, a linebacker, but he's got the mentality of just like an everyman, blue-collar, tough guy, which I really admire. And he's very humble despite his accomplishments in life, not just football. He's extremely accomplished. But he was really interested to learn about scouting. He wasn't one of these guys who would come in as an ex-player thinking because he played 10-plus years in the NFL at a high level, he already knew everything about finding a player. He was really humble in that. So we had really good discussions about how to scout players, specifically linebackers, and what he looks for, what I look for. And I learned a lot from him in the brief period of time, and then tried to help him with, like, hey, this is how you actually construct a report or how you go through the process of watching tape. Like, it doesn't just come like this, So it was really good. And I think Chris, in the short time he's been there, developed a really great appreciation for the scouting process and how you have to – there are no shortcuts to it. When people shortcut, they make mistakes, and he understands that. And there's a lot of really good personnel people up in Detroit. Lance Newmark, who's now the assistant GM of the Commanders, was up there with us. I've known Lance for a long time. He's elite. Chris, Ray Agnew, Brad is obviously very talented. You got Mike Martin, Don Corzine, all those kind of guys that got a really good staff. Brian Hudsmith, who's the college director, also was with us in Houston, that young group of guys I was talking about. So they do a great job up there, and Chris is a big part of it. I mean, Chris is kind of the unseen guy behind the scenes because he is not a doesn't need credit, doesn't need the accolades. He's had a ton of those in his life, so he's not looking for that. He's just looking to help Detroit win, and they're winning now. They got a great coaching staff, great scouting staff. Things are falling into place. But he's a big part of that, and he was a big part of the hiring process. And so you talked about identifying positive traits in people, and Chris can do that. Chris knows people, and he knows football, so I think that's really important.
I was glad during the playoffs last year some of the telecasts would mention Chris, because he's never going to say, hey, look at me. Some of the traits in Chris I see in this organization, and that there's no agenda. It's all about the team. It's not about who gets the credit. It's all about how are we what direction are we moving in, positive or negative. And you mentioned Brad Holmes, and obviously Brad and Dan Campbell, they've done a tremendous job. I mean, for the Lions to get that close to the Super Bowl, obviously you played a big role in putting that roster together. What were some of the keys to success in helping that group kind of gel and come together and building that roster?
Well, I think when Brad came in, he didn't have an agenda either. He's a humble guy. He loves scouting. He loves to talk players. He loves to watch film. And so he allowed everybody to be themselves and just describe what you see. He's very collaborative. Everybody's got a voice. Now, he's going to make the decisions, but him and Dan have a vision of how they want to construct the team. They wanted ball players who had the right mindset, the right attitude, and that's what we're trying to do here. I mean, we're not following Detroit's blueprint or anything like that. We have our own philosophies, but a lot of the same principles where, it's guys who love football, guys who are going to keep their nose clean off the field, and guys who can learn at a high level and, are also good athletes and good players. I mean, let's not eliminate that part of it because you'll get out of this job real fast if you do that,
So when you and Monti have conversations, do you guys generally agree on players? Or, have there been guys, I know it's only been a short time, just over a year, that you guys will go at it on? And how often does that happen in these meetings?
Yeah, I mean, my office is literally 3 feet from Monti's office, right across the hall from each other. So we don't have to walk into each other's office. We'll just sometimes talk across the hall while we're watching tape. We talk about players every day, along with Rob, along with the rest of the scouts who are in the building. But there's a great mutual respect that we've always had, and then I think it's not an issue for me to say, like, I don't really see it the way you're seeing it, or he'll say the same thing to me. And are you sure about that? And then we'll sit down and watch a guy together if we have a real disagreement. But we do see players very similarly, not because he said, hey, I'm running this team, this is how I want you to see players. We just kind of have the same philosophies and the same thing. I think, the first part is you got to see the athletic ability accurately, then you got the measurables, and then you're trying to see if this player fits your scheme, things like that. And we can both do that in a similar type of process. So it's easy because of the mutual respect, and we also kind of have a similar eye for players, I think.
So now that you've had a chance to kind of digest preseason game number one, who were some of the guys that caught your eye, that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think overall a lot of our young guys played well, along with some of our vets, and I think casual fan may get caught up in the score, the slow pace of the first half, not a lot of scoring, but there's not a lot of stuff in from an offense-defense scheme standpoint, so you're going to get some of that in the preseason. But the individual matchups is what you're really trying to focus on. Hey, how is this player carrying his technique over from practice to the game? Who's showing up, making some splash plays? The mode of play, like Coach Gannon likes to describe it, are we playing fast? Are we playing physical? Are guys making mental mistakes? And I didn't see a ton of that on the tape. I think Darius Robinson popped a little bit off that tape. I think, Owen Papo played really good. I thought Chris Barnes, I could go into a whole game review, but I thought we had a lot of guys really playing fast, playing physical. Star Thomas has done a great job in camp. He looked good in that game. So I think there are some individual players to be excited about from a, win-loss scheme standpoint. We don't really get into that in the preseason.
Yeah. So going back to Darius, so I did the Cotton Bowl last year, and he stood out, obviously, as a person and as a player. But not many people seem to really know about him for whatever reason. I mean, the guy played in the SEC, but it just didn't seem like when you guys drafted him that there wasn't a ton of buzz. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. gets buzz, and maybe it's because of the positions they played. What did you guys see in Darius Robinson when you were scouting him that sold you on him?
Yeah, I mean, he probably wasn't known a lot about by the media, but by scouting people, he was known a lot about it. I mean, my phone lit up when we took him, but I think Darius, first of all, when you've seen him physically, like the guy's shoulders are wider than this wall right here. The guy's frame is amazing. He's long. He's a good athlete. He played both inside, basically every alignment on the D-line, and stand up throughout his career. So there's a lot of versatility to him. What really jumped out when we started getting to know the kid personally was the football intelligence, the personality, the leadership. I mean, the guy's a really impressive dude when you meet him, and he loves football. And that's the kind of stuff the kind of people we're trying to get in this building. And then his ability to be kind of scheme versatile and play a lot of different positions along our front was very attractive. Honestly, that's one of those you're kind of holding your breath. Hey, is this guy going to be there? There's a couple other guys we had in the mix, but really, we're hoping Darius would be there, and he was. And sometimes it just falls right, and you get the player you were interested in without having to give anything up, and this was one of those times.
You said your phone blew up. What were some of the texts? Like, man, we were thinking about him, early second round or whatever. You guys got him, darn it. What were they?
There's, you get a lot of these. Oh, great pick. Like there's a lot of glad handing like that throughout the draft. But this was multiple people that I've known for a long time that I respect, coaches, scouts, saying, great pick. You guys, we were really trying to get him, stuff like that. So I think there were a lot of people that would have been all over him had he slid past us, but that wasn't going to happen.
Starling Thomas, you touched on him, how he stood out. Sean Murphy-Bunting obviously is going to be a starter at corner. The other corner position, how important is it for you guys to have a decision on that at some point in camp as to who that guy is going to be?
Well, I mean, that's the coach's call. I don't think it's that important. I think we have a lot of guys, mostly younger players, who are really competing for spots on the 53. And we played a lot of guys on defense last year, partly because of necessity, but partly because if you're good enough to be on the field, you're going to be on the field, and these guys will roll some guys through. And I think we're in a good situation where it's not we're not relying on one player to make this secondary work. So I think there's a bunch of guys who can fill in that role right now.
Marvin Harrison Jr., you talked about that Darius was the guy you wanted all along. Monty was on the pod and said, we had our mind made up about Marvin Harrison Jr. Early on, and knowing that there were going to be quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, he was going to be the pick at 4. What have you seen from him so far? Wolf and I talked about this on TV the other night during the preseason game. Like, you kind of forget he's a rookie. You just assume that he's going to be great because he's excellent in everything he does. It feels like he's been a pro for a long time.
Yeah, and that's as a scout, you're usually watching the guys that you think may be on the bubble a little bit more, or the more of the developmental, see how much progress they make throughout camp, things like that. Marvin's a guy that sometimes, like you're saying, you forget to watch him because he feels like a vet. He's so polished. He's such a pro in the way he approaches it, the work ethic, the mental ability, and he's really been an easy guy for us to get acclimated to the program. He's just hit the ground running. So I think the future is bright for Marvin. He's still a rookie. He's still got a lot of work to do, just like the rest of these guys. Yeah. But he's been great so far.
How did you, when you watched the film from this past game, how did you evaluate the two guys that are battling for the backup spot behind Kyler?
Again, because of the limited scheme that we're putting in, it's hard to really come up one way or another. I think the totality of practices play every bit as much as the game stuff does. We're going to go up. We're going to have a couple practices with Indy. That'll be really good. So we'll get some one-on-ones, first team versus first team work for both of those guys. And then they're going to split the reps again in game 2, I believe. So that's going to be exciting. I think it's a close battle, and that it's not close to being decided yet,
yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, and obviously it's really important because, it's hard to make it through 17 games at any position. And obviously at that position, Kyler's healthy. Everybody says he's done everything we've asked him to do. What do you think is the next step for him? Because I know you scouted him, I'm sure, very early on in his high school career. when a lot of people said, and you maybe were one of them, I heard people say, he's the best high school player I've ever seen. Where is he, and where do you think he can go this year?
Well, I think Kyler's been awesome since we've been here, really, with the rehab process last year. Anytime you have a coaching staff turnover, you're getting a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback coach, new head coach, new general manager, people don't always look at that from the player's perspective and how much change they have to deal with. And anybody who goes into their new job and you've got a new boss, a new direct superior, a new guys working with, that's going to take you a while to get comfortable and acclimate. And Kyler's done nothing but put his best foot forward from the second all of us got here. And I think anybody in this organization would tell you that. So everybody that I've ever talked to is very pleased with Kyler. I think in terms of Kyler's improvement, that's up to him and the coaches where that needs to come. But Kyler's been great. I mean, he's had really good practices. He's here all the time. The guy's a workaholic. He's digging into every facet of improvement. You're going to see him with, a strength coach, a trainer, a coach, out on the field throwing. The guy's never not working. So there's certainly not any kind of concern there. Yep. So I'm excited to see what he can do. The guy's as healthy as he's ever been. He looks athletic. His arm looks live. He's had great practices. So you got to carry that over the season. That's what matters. But I think he's ready to do that. I'm excited for his.
Your second-round pick, you guys had, 7 guys in the first 90 picks. Your second-round pick, Max Melton, hopefully we'll get a chance to see him in Indy. Played at Rutgers. Greg Schiano has a history of producing guys that end up making it in the NFL. I did not have, ESPN, ABC, we don't have any Big Ten anymore. So other than the bowl game or if it's a non-conference game, I didn't see him at all last year. What did you guys see in him that really got you excited about picking him where you did?
Well, there's a lot of those things you just talked about the Rutgers program, about how those guys are coached. Again, kind of like Marvin, this guy's a pro. He's got an older brother who plays in the league, Bo Melton. The guy comes from an athletic family. And Max, really good special teamer, good defensive back who's improved throughout his career. We saw the speed, length, athletic ability you're looking for in a corner, those kind of traits to develop and work with. But we also saw a good player and a guy who was tough, who was fast, who had cover skills, zone and man, special teams. So we see a lot of tools there to continue to develop. And Max is having a really good camp. He missed a little bit of time, but hopefully we'll get him back out there for Indy and he can keep building on that because he's looked good. I mean, we're excited about Max for sure.
Isaiah Adams, when you went back and watched the film from this past week, because what we're seeing a couple times is, he got beat. But obviously we don't know what the call is. We don't know, if it was a mistake by him or somebody else. What are some things that excite you about him, and where are some things you think he needs to grow here throughout camp?
Yeah, I mean, I think Isaiah, as soon as we got him in here, again, this guy's a really hard worker. He's a tough guy. He's just been grinding. And I think, live game, fans might say, Isaiah's really struggling. You watch the tape, it's not quite what you thought it was live, and then you realize, that sack that you would have thought watching the game live, that's not on Isaiah. Things like that, like you're just saying the scheme-wise, but I think he shows physicality. He had a couple pancake blocks in the game. He also had some mistakes, got beat a couple times, but that's any rookie offensive lineman. I mean, that's probably, other than quarterback, the hardest position to acclimate to, the speed of the game, the technique, the kind of monsters you're trying to block and stuff like that. And he was going in there. It was a really good test against the Saints' first team O-line. They have a good front, D-line, excuse me. So he had some good matchups, and I think he learned from that. There's good plays on film. There's some plays he'd like that back and improve, and he'll improve upon those. That's what the coaches are working on right now. So we're excited about Isaiah, and it takes time with offensive linemen. Yeah. Like you see guys develop 3-4 years into the league that didn't look very good early in their careers because there's so much nuance to that position, the technique, the just learning. The guys will get moved from different positions and getting the footwork down side to side. Like there's a tremendous amount of improvement you can make there.
So as you guys get through the joint practices, the next 2 preseason games, and you start to finalize the roster, what goes on in the room? Take us inside there in terms of what the conversations are like, all the things that you guys have to consider, whether it's on the personnel side or the coaching side, about, okay, here are the guys that are on this team.
Yeah, I think, JG and Monti are going to lead that, and I think this is a more competitive roster than it was a year ago. I think I can confidently say that. So there are going to be some tough decisions here. We are going to probably have to cut some players that will catch on and produce for somebody else, and that's just as you develop your roster, you're going to have some of that. But we need to get the right 53 for us, guys that are going to be the best players we can get, but also fit roles on the team. Like that's where special teams comes into play. That's where, hey, do you keep a X amount of O linemen versus X amount of DBs? Who's going to be active on game day? How much are you going to get from that guy versus the long-term prospect who may not help you at all this year other than just a depth role? So those are hard things to balance, especially when you like both players. But that's what it comes down to, really. It comes down to this position depth player versus this position depth player. Can either one of those guys help us on game day? Who's closer? Who has a path to the game, and who does that quicker versus the long-term benefits of keeping a player and developing him?
Does the new kickoff rule make it harder this year because you may, in the past, say, well, we're going to keep 6 receivers no matter what because one of them's going to be a returner and a gunner. Well, now you need a gunner on punts, but you don't need him on kickoff. So, how could that impact whether you keep a big guy as opposed to a speed guy and the back end of the roster for special teams?
I think that's still to be determined because, yes, you don't need a gunner for kickoff, but as we've seen early on so far, those blocks are getting defeated fast, and guys are coming clean because you can whip a guy in 5 yards, and so speed, quickness still matters, and it's really a toughness factor then. So I think you're going to still lean toward the best prospects that can also play some special teams for you. Will this ends up translating into a few more special teams safeties or special teams inside linebackers? Possibly. We just have to wait and see how, going back to the way kickoffs used to be covered, and you'd always have your special teams linebacker where, like you were talking about, maybe they shifted away from that to more of your special teams gunners, extra gunners, and stuff like that in the last couple of years because the kickoff kind of went away.
All right, a couple more, Dave. We'll get you out of here.
Yeah, take your time.
I was reading an ESPN article on you from I think it was like 2020 that featured you just talking about your life as a scout on the road. And I thought I read something about you collect something. Is it like credentials? Did I misread that? Or if you collected what you would have? Because I have, and some of it was not intentional. Like I have a lot of credentials from like 20 years ago of games I did. I remember, and I got rid of them. I had like boards because as a play-by-play guy, you've got like a chart in front of you. And I had a Miami of Ohio game that I did for ESPN, and Sean McVay was a player. I'm like, McVay. I'm like, oh man, that's Sean McVay. Like I was just kind of looking through some of the old ones, and I don't know, is this something?
Yeah, no, I collect Marriott points. That's what I count on the road. But no, I didn't keep any credentials or anything like that. I try and keep all my old scouting reports that I wrote, and I keep all those in a bin. It's in the storage bin, storage unit right now. But not really sure why I do that. I just kind of feel bad throwing them out because I put so much work into it. But
So you have reports from like 1999?
I have every report I ever written. So
do you ever go back and look at it and be like, man, I nailed that one?
Occasionally I will, especially if a guy reminds me of a dude I wrote 20 years ago, and I'll go look at, let me go look at my Kennard Lang report and see, hey, all right, I was off on that dude, or he didn't remind me so much of that, or like, that's exactly what I was thinking. I do have a pretty good memory, so a lot of this stuff is still retained up there, but the more names you add to your little mental database, the more you forget. So.
Do you remember what you had written up on Tom Brady?
Did not scout Tom Brady. So
Larry Fitzgerald.
Didn't scout Fitz.
I'm trying to think who else would have been.
I was a Southeast scout for the majority of my career, so most guys coming out of that area.
Carlos Dansby, who was a big part of the Cardinals Super Bowl run.
I remember Carlos, yep.
Do you remember what you had on?
Versatile guy. I would say second round, probably grade.
Again, the fact that the fact you even remember that he was a second round pick, a lot of people probably wouldn't remember that, so it's impressive. Any like misses that you think about and you're like, man, I was wrong on that guy? I mean, you're not, if you have them, you're not alone.
Oh, yeah. That's a big part of learning in this business is learning from your mistakes. And I think the way to be a good scout is to be humble and to really analyze why you missed. You get more out of learning why you missed than why you hit, and then not making those mistakes a second time. And trying, a big part of scouting, I had a guy who once told me scouting is about comparison. And I think that's largely true. And once you have that Rolodex of players that you can say, this guy reminds me a lot of this guy, and this guy was a good player. He made it. So even though I don't love everything about this player, he has some of those same traits that are going to allow him to make it because I've seen player A make it before. And the more you do that, and then vice versa, I don't think this guy's going to make it because he's going to have the same problems that player B had. And player B didn't make it. And I liked player B, and I made a mistake then. Let me not make another one. So I think, I got plenty of misses. I had a boss who once told me he cuts off a finger every time he misses, so you got Chuck back here, it was fine. But no, I've got a ton of misses, and like I said, I try and learn from all of them. So this would be a 2-hour show if I went into all the misses.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I was curious about before I let you go, now that you've kind of watched Monti in this role, as opposed to a role that's similar to the role that you have now as the number 2 guy, and being around whether it was Brad Holmes or other GMs, obviously to be a general manager, it's more than just scouting. It's scouting coaches. It's relationships with players, relationship with the media. Like, what are some of the things you've noticed? Like, are you taking notes? Have you been taking notes on other things as you think about what you want to do with the next step in your career?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, and what I've always done, and this is just the way I operate, my focus is entirely on being the best assistant general manager I can be. If something else comes along down the road, that's great. If it doesn't, that's great too, because I love being here. Michael's given me a great opportunity. Monti's given me a great opportunity. I love working with JG and the staff and everybody else. And so I do that a little bit just because there's parts of this job that I'm doing now that I never really understood till I got in here. And there's a lot of stuff that Monti does right now that you don't really think of that doesn't have to do with roster construction or scouting personnel evaluations. It has to do with running an entire organization from his chair, the stuff he's asked to do in terms of maybe staffing or budgets or travel or things where people go to him for questions or answers, and that's different than saying, can this left tackle take a good pass set, or how is this defensive tackle's get off? Stuff that I'm qualified to do. I'm not qualified to do that other stuff. So listening to him, learning from him, watching, what he's going through, I do absorb that, but I'm focused on scouting the players and getting this roster as good as it can be really right now.
As a diehard Denver Nugget fan, did you scout Nikola Jokic thinking he would be this good? Because Bob Myers, who I did a bunch of games with last year, said, in the room, we weren't even talking about him. Like, we knew who he was, but nobody was even talking about him. He went in the second round.
I actually saw him play over in Serbia in the 8th grade, and no.
See, based on you, though, and just who you are, it would not have surprised me if you had a complete, breakdown.
Nah, I love that guy, man. I huge Nuggets fan, and, they got some great players.
How did you become a Denver Nuggets fan living in the East Coast?
I grew up in Long Island and upstate New York, and I was never a Giant or Jet fan. I was always a Bronco fan, and then I just kind of started checking out the basketball team, too. That was back when they had Fat Lever, who's my all-time favorite player, Alex English, some of those great old Nuggets teams, and so I've always been a Nuggets fan. I'm not a New York sports fan of any of the teams, which is kind of weird because that's all I've been exposed to in my childhood. So.
Well, I know Cardinal fans are glad that you're here, and this has been great, Dave, getting to know you a little bit more and getting the fans to have a better feel for Dave Sears. So appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks, Dave.